Chapter 1. The Glass That Never Shattered. In the deep jungles of Harrow Cowl, where the clouds strangled the mountain tops and the wind howled like forgotten gods, a child was born not into peace but into prophecy. His people did not sing lullabies. They survived, hunted, fought, and bled beneath blood-red storms. His mother was never known to the galaxy, and his father was devoured by the civil war that haunted their world like a curse etched in the soil. Yet the Force, that ancient river of all things seen and unseen, moved through him, not gently, not kindly, but with violent intent, as if it had chosen this child not to be a healer, but a wound. They named him Mace, and the Force marked him with glass. When he was taken to the Jedi Temple, he came not with laughter or tears, but with silence. Even as a child, he did not cry. His presence unsettled the other younglings, not because he was cruel, but because he could see what others could not. The small fractures in all things. He saw weaknesses before they formed, shatter points in the choices of others, the quiet paths that would one day explode. He did not understand it then, but the Masters feared it. The Force whispered through him differently. It did not offer wisdom. It screamed of danger. The crystal he was given rejected him. 3 times he meditated in the crystal caverns. 3 times it shattered in his palm, not from darkness, but from something else, a resonance the Jedi could not explain, a violent harmony that broke precision with truth. Where others sought clarity, Mace found fractures. Where others sought peace, he saw the edge of war. He was not built for the quiet serenity the Jedi revered. He was built to survive what serenity could not withstand. And still, he trained. He rose faster than most, not because he craved power, but because the Force demanded it of him. His instructors often said he carried a burden no Padawan should bear. His mind was sharp, his will like tempered durasteel. But beneath that calm, there burned something unspeakable. Mace did not meditate to connect with the Force. He meditated to cage it. He saw the darkness not just in the galaxy, but in himself. Not lust for power, not greed, but judgment. The desire to intervene, to act, to do what others feared to do. Where the Jedi taught restraint, Mace dreamed of precision. Where the Jedi taught to avoid the dark, Mace studied how to resist it from within. He saw that to fight evil without understanding, it was to surrender the fight before it began. The Jedi called this dangerous. Mace called it necessary. The Masters debated whether to place him on the council. Too young, too intense, too unpredictable. But the galaxy was changing. Rumors of corruption within the Republic swirled like insects around decay. The dark side was rising, slow and silent, like a tide waiting to drown the blind. And the council needed a blade that could see where others could not. So they made him master. They handed him robes, titles, responsibility, but they never gave him trust, not fully, not completely. And Mace knew. He always knew. He studied ancient texts, not shared with most Jedi scrolls from lost temples, archives buried beneath what remained of As's fractured records of Jedi who had walked near the abyss and returned with madness in their eyes. Mace did not fear these records. He read them in silence, not to be tempted, but to understand what others feared. He learned of techniques long forbidden, of Force pathways meant to trap the mind, of visions that showed not the future, but the moment of fracture, the shatter point in destiny itself. He did not know then how this would be used. He did not know the price, but the Force did. He began crafting a form of lightsaber, combat unlike anything the Order had ever sanctioned, a path through the storm. a dance on the blade's edge between light and dark. It required absolute control, total immersion in the present moment, and the ability to channel the darkness of one's opponent, not to absorb it, but to reflect it back as a mirror of violence. The council was wary. They warned him, but they did not stop him. Perhaps they hoped he would fall, and in falling, prove their point. But Mace did not fall. He danced within the abyss and did not blink. In secret, he wondered if he had already fallen and simply learned to walk inside the fall. There were whispers among the younglings that Master Windu had no dreams, that his sleep was filled only with stillness, but this was not true. Mace dreamed often of glass that never shattered, of temples buried in ash, of stars bleeding from the sky. He saw war before it came. He saw betrayal before it walked the temple halls, and in the center of all of it, he saw a face, a boy, a shadow with golden eyes, a storm waiting to be born. When they brought Anakin Skywalker before the council, the room was filled with silence. Mace said the words, "He will not be trained," and he meant them, not out of spite, not out of fear, but because he saw it clearly. The boy was not a question. He was a fracture. A break in the Force so profound it echoed backward and forward at once. A shatterpoint in the shape of a child. No matter what path they chose, the galaxy would break around him. The others voted. The boy was trained. And Mace watched, not with anger, but with preparation. He began to train harder. He studied war. He studied how the Republic rotted from within. He studied how the Jedi were drifting from guardians to servants, from seekers of balance to weapons of the Senate. And still he obeyed. Still he remained silent, because he knew the storm was coming, because he believed, perhaps naively, that when the storm arrived, someone would have to stand at its center. He did not believe in prophecy. He did not believe in chosen ones. He believed in the Force as it was flawed, unpredictable, dangerous. And he believed that sometimes the will of the Force was not to save, but to test. That perhaps the Force did not want peace. Perhaps it wanted clarity through fire. And so Mace trained and waited and watched. The child who saw the glass never shatter had become a man walking toward its breaking, and the Force held its breath. Chapter 2. The voice that carved the wind mace. Windu did not speak often, but when he did, the room quieted. Not from fear nor reverence, but because his voice carried something older than language. It was not command, it was not wisdom, it was gravity, a pull that turned conversations into confessions, doubts into silence. Even as a young knight, there was something about him that made others feel the Force more clearly, not in light, not in comfort, but in tension, as though the Force itself listened when he spoke. They said he could hear things others could not, whispers in the wind, patterns in footsteps, truth buried in hesitation. He once halted a political assassination, not through evidence, but by walking into a room and knowing something was broken. No words, no data, just a sense, a fracture. In harmony, and he spoke, and the would-be killer confessed, as if the Force itself had turned against him. These moments became legend, but to Mace, they were nothing more than echoes. He did not believe in glory. He believed in precision. The path he walked became narrower each year. The Jedi taught many things: patience, serenity, known attachment. But they had forgotten one lesson buried in the old texts: how to act with clarity in moments of chaos. They had become philosophers, advisors, diplomats, Mace did not despise this, but he saw the rot it allowed to grow. While the Jedi waited for balance, darkness moved in silence. While the Council debated meanings, Sith Lords twisted meanings into weapons. Mace knew the old truth. Peace is a lie if built on indecision. So he trained harder, not for war, for clarity. Vopad, the form he shaped in secret, was not born of rage. It was born of necessity. It was not an embrace of the dark, but a channel, a way to reflect an enemy's hatred back at them, to become a conduit for their fury without becoming corrupted by it. It was the most dangerous form in Jedi history. Most who attempted it fell. Only Mace mastered it, and even he did not trust it. The Council demanded to know its limits. He gave them diagrams, controlled demonstrations, but they did not understand. Vopad could not be taught like the others. It was not a form. It was a surrender to the storm, a scream turned into a song. And Mace, for all his strength, did not feel pride in this creation, only dread. Because with every duel, every mission, he felt how easy it would be to let go fully, to stop holding the line, to fall and not care. Still, he stood on that line. For the Republic, for the Order, for the Jedi who still believed. He became known as the High Judge of the Council. Not in title, but in spirit. He sat in silence during debates. He did not speak unless needed, but when he did, the room shifted. Votes changed. Opinions cracked. Even Yoda listened more closely when Mace addressed the Force. For Mace had touched something few dared. Not just the dark, but the will beneath both light and shadow. He did not claim to know its purpose. He did not believe the Force had morality, but he believed it had direction. And that direction was often terrifying. He began to walk paths that others feared. He investigated disappearances other Jedi would not name. He visited planets where the dark side was not hidden but worshipped. He stood before Sith relics, not to be tempted, but to understand. His colleagues whispered. Some feared he was falling, but the truth was simpler. Mace walked near the abyss, so no one else had to. And then the war came, not all at once, not with fire, but with whispers. Dooku returned. Not as a Jedi, not even as a man, but as a herald. A sign that what they feared was already here. A Sith in the open. A leader of Separatists. A puppet perhaps, or perhaps the master. Mace felt the Force recoil the moment Dooku's name was spoken. He had fought beside Dooku once, learned from him, respected him, and now he was the storm's first echo. The Jedi were called to act. Not as monks, but as generals. And Mace knew what this meant. They would lose themselves. The Jedi were never meant to lead armies, to sit in war rooms, to wear armor and give orders to soldiers bred for slaughter. But the Council voted. The Senate demanded, and the galaxy cheered. For the first time in generations, the Jedi would fight, and Mace Windu was made one of its first war leaders. He did not protest, he did not smile. He accepted, not because he wanted war, but because he feared who else might lead it if he did. Not in battle, he was unstoppable. He moved like thunder behind glass, precise, beautiful, and deadly. Clone commanders marveled at him. Enemy warriors fled. His blade burned violet through chaos. But beneath the victories, beneath the strategy, and the command, he felt the Force scream. Loud, unfiltered, as if the war itself was an abomination, as if they had stepped into a ritual they did not understand. And he remembered the words carved into ancient stone beneath the Jedi temple. Words most could not translate. The Force does not guide. it consumes. He began to see the cracks more clearly. Now, in the council, in the Republic, in himself, the wind no longer whispered truths. It howled in defiance. The vapid sang louder. The silence in his mind grew thinner, and he began to wonder if the war was not a mistake, but a test. Not of victory, but of judgment. He kept his thoughts quiet. He trusted few. Even Yoda grew more distant, buried in meditation. The young Jedi around him began to change. Their eyes lost wonder. Their robes darkened with war, and one among them watched him closely. Anakin, the boy from the sands. Mace saw him rise, saw his power bloom like fire without air, saw his choices bend toward fear. And every time he looked at the boy, he saw the same pattern. Not destiny, not greatness. A shatterpoint, closer, louder, nearing the moment it would break. And Mace listened to the force, to the wind, to the silence that comes before collapse. Chapter 3. The prophecy no one claimed. There are texts buried so deep within the Jedi Temple that even time forgets them. Scrolls sealed behind force-locked doors, etched in languages whose meanings are long extinct. They speak not of peace, nor of light, but of uncertainty, of visions that came wrapped in shadow, of truths mistaken for lies, and lies mistaken for destiny. Mace Windu, alone among the council, sought these scrolls not for hope, but for caution. Because prophecy, he believed, was not a map, it was a wound in time that never healed cleanly. The prophecy of the chosen one was one such wound. It whispered of one who would bring balance to the Force. But the text was damaged. Translations varied. Some versions said the chosen one would destroy the Sith. Others claimed he would destroy the Jedi. One even spoke of fire that consumes both temple and thrones. No one truly knew what balance meant, not even Yoda, and that terrified Mace more than any enemy ever had. He did not speak of this often, but he studied it, late in the night, in the silence of meditation chambers, where no other council member walked. He traced the prophecy's words with his hands. He watched how the Force trembled when certain syllables were spoken aloud. The Force itself seemed to recoil from the name chosen. It did not feel like destiny. It felt like a warning. And then came the boy, Tatooine-born, slave-blooded, fire-eyed. Skywalker, he should not have existed. Too old, too raw, too powerful. The Force around him pulsed like a living storm. He was a beacon or a breach. The first time Mace stood in his presence, he did not see potential. He saw fracture. The child's aura was a shatterpoint unto itself, constantly shifting, pulling at threads of fate with every breath. Where others felt awe, Mace felt dread. The council debated. Qui-Gon Jinn, wild and wandering, believed the boy was the chosen one. He saw divine purpose in every accident, every dream. He stood before them with calm defiance, asking for permission to train the child outside tradition, outside law. And Mace, with the calm of stone, said the words, "No, he will not be trained." But even as he spoke them, he knew it would not last. The council relented. Obi-Wan Kenobi, younger than most thought-wise, took the boy as his Padawan. The vote passed. The path was set. And Mace, in silence, watched it begin. He did not argue again. He did not object, because he knew that once a fracture appears in glass, pressing harder only spreads the break. He returned to the old scrolls. Read them again, not as prophecy, as warning. The Jedi had always interpreted balance as light prevailing. But balance is not triumph. Balance is equivalence, stalemate, silence. And if the dark side had grown strong, then balance would not come through its destruction, but through suffering on both ends. The Jedi refused to believe this. They saw themselves as protectors, but Mace was beginning to see them as accelerants. Fire disguised as guardianship. The war was brewing now. Slowly, in whispers, disappearances, Dooku's name returned like a ghost. Republic systems broke away in secrecy, and in the Senate, power shifted quietly into the hands of one man, Palpatine, a chancellor who never seemed to make errors, who never aged, who always knew when to speak and when to remain silent. Mace watched him carefully, even then, not because he had proof, but because the man cast no shadow in the Force, and that, to a Jedi Master trained in fracture and intuition, was unnatural. And still the boy grew. Anakin's power was undeniable. He mastered forms with terrifying ease. His connection to the Force was deeper than anyone Mace had ever seen. But so too was his attachment to Obi-Wan, to Padme, to approval, and worse, to control. Mace did not hate him for this. He recognized it. He had walked that edge himself. But Anakin lacked the discipline to resist what whispered beyond the veil. More troubling still were his dreams. Anakin began speaking of visions, of fire, of loss, of death he could not prevent. The Council dismissed them, said the Force does not show fixed futures, but Mace listened more carefully. These dreams had shape consistency. They came like echoes, not from Anakin's mind, but from something deeper, something calling to him. Dreams are the language of the Force when it cannot speak plainly, and these dreams were screams. The boy had been marked by prophecy, but not claimed by it. That distinction mattered, for Mace had begun to believe that the Chosen One was not a savior, but a blade. One forged to strike down something unseen, perhaps the Sith, perhaps the Jedi, perhaps both. The Force does not favor, it balances. And balance is not peace, it is correction. The old texts, the ones others refused to translate, hinted at this. He who is born of none, yet tied to all, the wound that seals, but only through ruin, not a hero, not a villain, a catalyst. And the Jedi had lit the fuse. Mace began to change. He withdrew from politics, spoke less during council sessions, observed more. He sent Jedi on assignments to test fault lines in the galaxy, to feel where the Force trembled most. And always, those tremors led back to Anakin, to Palpatine, to the silent, burning center where the Jedi sat and pretended. They still controlled the currents of fate. He trained more alone, not to refine his blade, but to listen, to hear the storm before it arrived. In meditation, he began to see a vision that returned each night, a tower of light collapsing inward, consumed by shadow, and at its center, not a Sith Lord, but a Jedi, hooded, silent, watching as the fire took everything, and behind that Jedi was Anakin, not weeping, not raging, smiling. The scrolls offered no comfort. The Force offered no guidance, only silence, and Mace Windu, who had once heard the song in the wind, now heard nothing, only the faintest sound of glass beginning to crack. Chapter 4, The Clone. That bled without pain. The Jedi did not see the trap until it had already closed. Their vision, once deep as stars, had narrowed to politics, doctrine, and war. And in that narrowing, something monstrous was born not from the dark side directly, but from the cold calculation of science. It wore the faces of men. It marched in perfect formation. It bled when struck. It obeyed without question. But it did not choose. These were the clone soldiers, engineered in secret, grown in vats on Camino, shaped by the will of a long-dead bounty hunter, and handed to the Jedi like weapons wrapped in flesh. When Mace Windu stood among them for the first time, he felt no pride, no surge of security, no brotherhood. He felt silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence before a scream. The clones were not evil. They were not machines. They were life-forged without freedom, designed to die in someone else's war. And the Jedi, once defenders of life, became their commanders. Mace never gave speeches to his troops. He did not know how to lie to them. He saw the way they looked at him with reverence, yes, but also with something deeper, hunger, as if his presence meant they were real, as if his orders gave them purpose. They did not resent him. That was what made it worse. They trusted him. And Mace, who saw shatter points in every structure, knew this trust would one day break. The war consumed the galaxy quickly. Systems fell. Jedi scattered. Clones poured onto battlefields in rivers of armor and plasma. Victory followed their steps, but so did something else, something darker. Each triumph left the Jedi more compromised, more dependent on soldiers they did not understand, more entangled in the politics of a republic that no longer resembled the dream it claimed to serve. Mace led from the front. He did not delegate the burden of command. He carved through enemies with violet fire, his vopid dancing through droids and death alike. But even as he fought, he studied, observed. Every battlefield was a lesson, and what he saw chilled him. The clones did not hesitate, not once, not even when faced with suicidal odds. They moved as one, killed as one, died without questions. They were not fearless, they were conditioned. Every instinct bent toward obedience. And deeper still, Mace began to sense programming, not just in their minds, in their fate. The force around them felt twisted, dull, like a song played out of tune. Something had been buried in them, something hidden, something waiting. He spoke to Yoda of this once, quietly, between campaigns. The old master nodded, but said little. Perhaps he knew more. Perhaps he had seen what Mace had seen, visions of a republic marching toward tyranny, of Jedi becoming generals instead of guardians. But Yoda still believed in the core of the order. Mace no longer did. He began requesting fewer clones on his missions. He operated in smaller teams, more stealth, less spectacle. Some said he was growing paranoid. Some said he had lost faith in the Republic. They were wrong. He had lost faith in the illusion. The war grew bloodier. Planets fell. Friend turned against friend. Separatists built monstrosities, superweapons, bioplagues. The Jedi fought harder. Mace, more than any, felt the strain. Each battle required deeper dives into Vopid. Each opponent more vicious. Each victory felt emptier, because no matter how many systems they freed, the galaxy grew darker, and the clones changed. They did not age like normal men. They did not question their orders, but something in their eyes began to shift, a hollowness, a distance, as if the war was slowly erasing whatever identity they had once possessed. Mace tried to speak with them, individuals, commanders, medics. Some showed glimmers of thought, of deviation, but most remained locked in their roles. And then came the whispers of Jedi turning, of entire units vanishing in the outer rim, of a Sith Lord orchestrating the war from behind the curtain. Dooku named him Sidious, but no one knew his face, no one knew his hand. The Senate dismissed it. The Chancellor remained silent. And Mace, in meditation, began to feel it all converge. Clones, Jedi, war, deception, all drawn toward a single, burning point in the Force, a shatter point, and Anakin was at its center. Skywalker rose through the war like fire through dry grass. He became a symbol, a knight of impossible victories. Soldiers worshipped him. Civilians adored him. But Mace saw something else. A boy drowning in fear, craving control. The war fed him what he needed: praise, power, validation. But it also fed his shadows. Each loss deepened his desperation. Each death cracked his restraint. Mace did not speak against him. He observed, calculated, waited. He spoke more often. Now with Obi-Wan, not of tactics, but of Anakin, of concerns neither dared to voice fully. Obi-Wan defended him, but Mace, who saw into fractures, knew what Obi-Wan feared but would not admit. The boy was slipping. The war had given him glory but stolen his peace. And all around them, the clones continued to march. Mace began to meditate on their creation, who had authorized the army, who had predicted the war. Why had the Kaminoans obeyed without question? The answers pointed toward silence, toward shadows, toward something ancient. The name Sifo-Dyas surfaced, a Jedi long dead under strange circumstances. His authorization, his code, but his voice had vanished, and behind it, Palpatine Mace began to see it clearly. The war was not a response to chaos. It was the chaos orchestrated, designed. The Jedi had been led into it like cattle to the blade, and the clones they were, the blade itself, not enemies, not monsters, but instruments, conditioned from birth, each one carrying something unseen, something silent, a code, a switch. Mace did not know what it was, but he knew it waited. He could feel it in the Force now, like static before a storm, a wrongness that grew louder with every passing week. He tried to warn the Council, but the war deafened them. The Senate praised them, the Chancellor applauded them, and the Jedi kept leading the army. Deeper into the abyss, the clones did not rebel. They did not break, because they were never meant to. They were meant to obey, and Mace Windu, who had always seen the glass before it shattered, now stood within it, the cracks spreading, the tension rising, the blade lifting, but not yet falling. Not yet. Chapter 5. The Wound in the Force. The Clone Wars. In full now, consume the stars. Jedi once bound to peace, now lead battalions, and beneath every victory, something ancient groans. Wounded, unseen, eternal. It is not the Republic that bleeds. It is the Force itself. The galaxy is ablaze. A war born of shadow now wears the armor of legitimacy. Each system that falls, each world that burns, sends ripples through the Force like blood from a deep and sacred wound. But the Jedi do not see it. No, they cannot. For they have become warriors, and warriors rarely hear the cries of the spirit. Mace Windu, once a sentinel of balance, now marches through fire and steel, clad in violet light. His saber dances, not in ceremony, but in battle. He who once sought harmony now commands legions, makes war councils, and delivers justice at the edge of a blade. The code endures on their lips, but not in their deeds. The Clone Wars have made Jedi into generals, into symbols, into lies. Beneath the Senate rotunda, Chancellor Palpatine smiles, but behind his smile is the voice of death. He fans the flame with careful breath, orchestrating slaughter with a politician's tongue. The Sith extinct in name now thrive in silence, and the Force, once in balance, trembles. A wound grows. This wound is not of flesh. It is not of light or dark. It is something deeper, a fissure in destiny, a silence where the Force once sang. It coils beneath Coruscant, beneath Camino, beneath every world touched by the clone army's march, and it feeds on death. The Jedi do not know it, but their very presence in war is the blade that deepens the cut. When Jedi die, when they kill, the Force recoils. It twists, it groans, and the Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker, feels it. He does not understand the dread behind his visions, nor the pain that haunts his sleep. But it is there, always there. In dreams he sees fire, a city burning, a temple crumbling, a woman screaming. He sees Mace Windu's face, stern as stone, but cracked with judgment. He sees Obi-Wan turning away. He sees the Jedi Council cloaked in light, and yet shrouded in blindness. He hears whispers of Padme's death, long before it comes, but when he cries out to the Council, they offer silence. When he seeks trust, they give suspicion, and so the Chosen One drifts further from them, not in rebellion, but in pain. In yearning, the wound grows still. A moment comes when Mace Windu confronts the nature of this war. He walks alone in the halls of the temple, silent as shadows stretch. Across the marble floor, the statues of lost masters stare down, solemn, broken, mute. He senses something, a silence, a hollow. He confides in Yoda. There is a weakness in the Force, Mace murmurs. A tremor I cannot trace, as though something is consuming. Its breath. Yoda lowers his head, ancient eyes dim, clouded, all is. The shroud thickens. They speak no more of it, but the wound listens, and the Sith, buried in disguise, feed upon it. For each clone that dies, a life-bread for war, the Force bleeds. For each Jedi that falls, another thread in the tapestry of fate is cut. The galaxy tilts, not toward darkness, not toward light, but toward something far worse. Silence, a stillness in the soul of the cosmos. And in that stillness, Darth Sidious prepares his hand. He does not strike yet. No, a predator knows patience, but the board is nearly full. Grievous hunts, Jedi across. The outer rim, Count Dooku, once Jedi, now servant to darkness, enacts the grand illusion. And Anakin, wounded, torn between prophecy and love, begins to fracture. He is the scar tissue around the wound, a living nexus of power, of hope, of danger, and he is slipping. Mace sees it, but does not understand it. Yoda feels it, but cannot stop it. Obi-Wan senses it, but dares not speak it. The wound cannot be healed, not by wisdom nor war. It is fed by contradiction, peacekeepers as warriors, prophets as executioners, children raised to suppress love, and yet asked to serve a galaxy built upon it. And so the wound deepens, and beneath it all, deeper than war, deeper than prophecy, the Force begins to scream, but none hear it. None save the Sith, the Jedi, fight their battles. They bring justice to lawless systems. They win victories. They plant flags. But they do not win the war, for they cannot see it. The true war is not of planets. It is of souls. And they are already losing, as Coruscant celebrates victories, as the Senate applauds its soldiers, as clones march beneath banners of unity, the temple cracks unseen. A shadow dwells within, a whisper of betrayal, a memory yet to be born, and the wound. The wound is waiting. Waiting for the one who will break the dam, waiting for the fall, waiting for the moment when prophecy collapses into ash and the chosen one, unknowing, begins to listen. The Force is not silent anymore. It speaks to him in dreams, in fears, in shadows, and it says, "They will betray you. She will die. You were never meant to be theirs." The seed is planted. The scar begins to fester. The wound in the Force begins to open, and when it does, the light will not be extinguished. It will be corrupted. It will be weaponized. It will be turned. Chapter 6: The Dream of Vopad in the Storm of the Clone Wars, where light and dark blur with every breath. There exists a technique, feared, forbidden, and born in the heart of its creator. Mace Windu's Vopad, not just a form, but a path, a dance with the abyss. And in this dream, the shadow is always waiting to lead. Long before the war, before the sound of blasters echoed through the stars, before clone troopers followed Jedi into slaughter, Mace Windu dreamed not of battle, not of power, but of balance. And in this dream there was motion, pure, fluid motion, not the rigid strikes of Form 3, nor the elegant spirals of Form 4. This was something else, something new. It had no name, not at first. It had no master, but the storm within him, and it came to him not as vision, but as necessity. There had always been something restless in Mace, a fire, a shadow, not darkness, not quite, but something close, a hunger to understand the dark without becoming it, to face it not with denial, but with mastery. The council feared it. Some whispered behind temple walls, others merely watched, warily, but Windu did not flinch from it. He studied it, he danced with it, and so was born the 7th form VAA Pad. It was named after a predator of Serapin, a serpent of light and violence, its body constantly shifting, lashing, feeding off its opponent's energy. But what the creature did in instinct, Mace did in mastery. Vopad was no mere combat style. It was a philosophy. It welcomed aggression, not as surrender to the dark, but as a gateway to transcend it. Each strike invited the fury of the opponent. Each motion redirected it. Each step through Vopad was a step along the edge of darkness, never falling, always dancing. But not just anyone could tread that path. Others had tried. One had fallen. Sorabulk, a master of forms, once studied under Windu himself. But when he embraced Vopad, the style welcomed too much of him. The darkness he carried was not balanced. It was unchained. Sora fell not in battle, but in spirit. He joined Count Dooku, became a traitor, a Sith in all but name, and still Mace endured. For within him, Vopad lived not as corruption, but as discipline. His thoughts were clear, his will unmoved. His every movement was the storm tamed. The council would never understand. But he did not practice Vopad to prove them wrong. He practiced it because the galaxy was changing. The light side, patient, measured, restrained, no longer met the needs of this age. The dark side, swift, decisive, consuming, had returned in secret, and Mace Windu was caught between both, so he forged the path, and in battle it showed. On Bar's pity he faced armies and left none standing. On Dantuan, he led from the front, alone. Violet blade flashing like lightning in a hurricane dot to the clones, he was a symbol. To the Jedi, a warrior priest. To the Sith, a threat. But Vopid was not just a weapon for war, it was a mirror. It showed Mace who he truly was. Not just a Jedi, not just a counselor, but a guardian of the edge. The form demanded truth, the form exposed weakness. And in its deepest state, the moment where Vopid became alive, Mace would brush the boundary of the dark side only to refuse it, again and again, and again, and yet. The line thinned with each battle. Each kill drew him closer, each death a whisper, each victory a cost, and the wound in the Force, still growing, began to sense him. For even Vopad, in its brilliance, drew from the storm, and the storm was watching. The Chancellor smiled in his high tower. He had heard of Windu's victories. He had seen the reports. He had even praised a purple blade as a symbol of peace through strength. But in truth, he saw something more. He saw use. He saw threat. And in Windu's mastery of Vopad, he saw something dangerous. A Jedi who had found a way to skirt the abyss without drowning in it. A Jedi who, if allowed to live too long, might see too clearly. The dream of Vopad was not just Mace's alone. It was the Force itself, struggling to evolve, to find a language beyond the binary of dark and light. But evolution invites resistance, and resistance brings destruction. The Jedi Council never embraced Vopad. They respected Windu, feared him, perhaps, but they never truly understood what he was attempting. They saw a saber style, a war tool, but Vopad was not for war, it was for balance. Mace saw what they refused to see. That peace was not the absence of conflict, but the mastery of it. That understanding the dark side did not mean surrendering to it. That facing the shadow could, in rare hands, cleanse the soul. But the dream was fragile, and time was running short. One more battle, one more lie from the Chancellor, one more flicker in Anakin's eyes, and the dream would shatter that Sith had returned. The Clone Wars had torn the code asunder, and the Jedi, blind to their own unraveling, clung to ideals that no longer matched the war they fought. Vopad was never meant to save the galaxy. It was meant to save the Jedi from themselves. But now the storm is too close. The abyss too wide. The shadow too deep. And Mace Windu, the one Jedi who learned to walk beside it without falling, may soon be asked to make a choice. Strike down the darkness or become part of it. Chapter 7. Shadows on the Council Chamber was quiet. Too quiet for a galaxy at war. Sunlight poured through the high windows of the Jedi Council chamber, painting the floor in gold. The columns stood like guardians of an age slipping away, and beyond the transparent steel walls, Coruscant's endless cityscape glittered under a sky that knew nothing of peace. The hum of distant traffic was faint, like the whisper of ghosts. Mace Windu stood at the center of the circle, his back straight, his presence heavy with the weight of decisions no warrior should have to make. Around him, the 12 chairs of the council held familiar faces: Yoda, ancient and inscrutable; Obi-Wan, weary from the Outer Rim sieges; Ki-Adi-Mundi, cold logic etched in his brow; Plo Koon, silent behind his mask of glass and filters. They were the last light of an order older than empires. And yet, that light was flickering. The meeting had ended hours ago. The others had gone to their duties, to meditation, to war. Mace had remained. His hands were clasped behind his back. his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped low, staining the clouds in crimson. In that burning light, he saw the shadow of things to come. He had seen it before again and again in dreams that did not feel like dreams. The temple, burning, always burning, and in the heart of the flames stood a figure, a silhouette against the inferno, black as the void between stars. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, a lightsaber burning like a spear of blood in his hand. The mask was never clear, the voice never came, but the feeling did, sharp as a blade through the spine. Skywalker, he told himself, it could not be. That it was the darkness playing tricks, feeding fear into his thoughts. Yet the Force did not lie, not to him. His gift, his curse, was clarity at the breaking point. The shatter point of the galaxy was coming, and its fracture bore the name of Anakin Skywalker. He turned away from the window and walked the circle, his boots silent on the polished stone. His reflection moved with him tall, robed in brown and violet, a warrior in the armor of peace. He hated the reflection. It looked like a general, not a Jedi. The war had done that to all of them. The order was rotting from within. They could not see it, blind as they were behind walls of tradition and hope. But Mace saw. Every battle, every whispered rumor of betrayal, every senator fattened on bribes while clones died nameless on distant worlds, it all pointed to the same truth. The republic they fought for was not the republic they swore to protect. It was something else now, something hollow, and in that hollow, something waited. Master Windu, a voice called from the doorway. Mace did not startle. He had felt him long before he spoke. Anakin Skywalker stood there, hands clenched at his sides, his face a mask of impatience and barely caged fire. Skywalker, Mace said, his tone even. You were not summoned. You said I should report directly to you, Anakin replied. His voice was tight, clipped, as though every word was a blade. Mace studied him in silence. The Boino, the man radiated power. It spilled off him, in waves, thick and raw, coiled tight as a predator's muscles. But beneath that power lay something jagged, something breaking. What is it? Mace asked. Anakin stepped closer. The Chancellor trusts me, more than anyone. He tells me things he doesn't tell the Senate, or the Council. Mace's jaw tightened. The Chancellor again. Always the Chancellor. He's asking questions, Anakin continued, about the Council, about what happens when the war ends. Mace circled him slowly, measuring each word. And what did you tell him? That it isn't his place to decide, isn't it? Mace stopped in front of him, his gaze sharp as durasteel. The Chancellor commands the army. The Senate gives him emergency powers. He's been in office far longer than the Constitution allows. Do you see where this leads? Anakin's eyes flickered, blue but dark at the edges. I see a man trying to win a war. I see a man who has no intention of giving up that power, Mace said. His voice dropped, low and dangerous. And I see a Jedi Knight who spends too much time listening to him. Anakin bristled. He's my friend. Friends are a luxury we cannot afford. Mace turned away, but his words struck like a hammer. Not when the galaxy is burning. Silence stretched between them. The hum of speeders far below filled the void. When Anakin spoke again, his voice was softer, almost pleading. You don't trust me. Mace faced him. Their eyes locked, and for an instant the chambers seemed to shrink, the galaxy with it, until there was only the two of them and the invisible weight pressing down. "It's not about trust," Mace said at last. "It's about the choices you will make." Anakin's jaw tightened. His fists clenched until the knuckles whitened. And in that tension, Mace felt it, the storm raging inside him. Fear, anger, love, all tangled in a knot that could strangle the galaxy. The door hissed shut. Behind him, when he left, Mace stood alone again, the silence heavier than before. He returned to the window. The sun was gone now. Coruscant lay bathed in shadow, its towers glowing like blades in the dusk. He closed his eyes and saw the temple. Burn. Chapter 8. The false peace of Coruscant. Coruscant never slept. From the council spire, the city was a living ocean of light, waves of durasteel and transperisteel stretching beyond sight. Air traffic glittered like fireflies against the night sky, each one carrying secrets, ambitions, lives. The Republic's heart still beat strong to the untrained eye, but Mace Windu knew better. Beneath the skin, infection spread. He walked the hall of thousand fountains alone, the echo of his boots drowning in the endless cascade of water. The temple had always been a sanctuary, a place where sound became serenity, where silence gave clarity. But even here, shadows whispered. The war had poisoned everything. He paused by a pool where lilies floated on silver water. He remembered when younglings used to laugh here, their voices rising like birds in spring. Now the halls were quiet. The laughter was gone. Most of the children had been sent away, hidden on distant worlds. Those who remained trained with sabers in their hands and fear in their eyes. Mace knelt at the pool's edge and stared at his reflection. Lines etched deeper into his face with every passing day. His eyes looked harder, now colder. Maybe, once, they had held certainty. Now, only questions. How did it come to this? The Jedi were supposed to be guardians of peace. Now they were generals, commanders of legions bred for war. They called it necessity. The council told themselves the same lie every day, that when the war ended, things would return to the way they were. But deep down, they knew nothing would return. The order was already dying. The code could not survive this much blood. The force was shifting in ways even Yoda could not name. And at the center of that storm, Sidious Mace rose. His robes whispered like shadows as he turned toward the turbo lift that would take him into the heart of the city. Tonight, he would walk among the senators. Tonight, he would smell the rot with his own senses. The Senate rotunda glowed like a jewel in the Coruscant night. Thousands of pods hovered in concentric rings, each bearing the crest of a system drowning in war. Their voices clashed like blades, accusations, bargains, pleas. Democracy had become theater, and the audience had teeth. Mace stood in the observation gallery, cloaked in silence, watching the tempest below. Palpatine sat at the center, high on his floating dais, like a king in all but name. His face was calm, almost weary. The perfect mask of a man who bore the galaxy's weight for the sake of others. Mace hated him for that mask. The Jedi Masters' eyes swept the chamber. Senators draped in silks, their fingers jeweled, their voices honeyed with false virtue. Lobbyists slithered between them like eels, carrying promises soaked in credits. Behind every smiling face, Mace saw hunger, for power, for profit, for survival. This was the Republic they fought for. The galaxy believed in this illusion because it glittered bright enough to blind. But Mace saw the mold beneath the gold. He felt it in the Forcer, slow, gnawing decay that devoured from within. He turned away, Master Windu. The voice came from behind him. Smooth, familiar, dangerous. Palpa. Tine. The Chancellor approached with 2 red guards at his back, their armor gleaming like blood under the chamber lights. His smile was warm, his tone gentle, a kindly uncle greeting. An old friend. I did not expect to see you here, Palpatine said. These debates are tiresome even for politicians. For Jedi, I imagine they are torture. They are instructive, Mace replied. His voice carried no warmth. Palpatine chuckled softly. Ever the philosopher, tell me, what do you see from up here? A republic that has lost its way, Mace said. Palpatine tilted his head, studying him with those pale, calculating eyes. Perhaps. But what choice do we have? War forces compromise. Sacrifice. His smile deepened. Surely the Jedi understand that better than anyone. Mace stepped closer. His presence filled the space like a storm cloud. Compromise is not the same as corruption. Of course, Palpatine said lightly, and yet corruption thrives in war. You fight it as best you can. As do I. His gaze flickered toward the chamber, then back to Mace. We are not so different. You and I both burdened by duty, both willing to do what must be done. Mace held his stare. For a heartbeat, the noise of the Senate faded, and the Force thickened like smoke. Shadows coiled around this man, darker than any void Mace had ever touched. You should return to your debates, Mace said at last. His voice was iron. The Jedi will handle the rest. Palpatine's smile lingered, as he inclined his head. Of course, I have the utmost faith in your order. He left with his guards, his robes trailing like the wings of some patient predator. Mace watched him go, every muscle taut. He could still feel the darkness curling behind that mask of civility. A serpent coiled round the heart of the Republic. Hours later, Mace sat in meditation, but the silence brought no peace. The fountains whispered. The temple breathed, but his mind churned. Every path he saw led to the same abyss. The war would not end with victory. It would end with transformation of the Republic, of the Jedi, of everything. And in every vision, at the center of that transformation, stood 2 figures, Palpatine and Skywalker. When Mace opened his eyes, the dawn was bleeding through the high windows. Another day, another battle, another step toward the silence he feared more than death. Chapter 9. The secret war of the Chosen One night over Coruscant was never truly dark. The sky glowed with 1,000 lights, rivers of speeders flowing endlessly between towers that pierced the heavens. From the Chancellor's suite, the city stretched like a promise a galaxy tamed. Shining beneath the hand of order, Anakin Skywalker stood at the window, staring at that false peace. His reflection hovered over the cityscape like a ghost, a man of war draped in black eyes, hollowed by sleepless nights, his fingers curled against the transparisteel. Beyond the glass, a world glittered. Behind his eyes, another burned. The dreams had returned fire. Screams Podmum, her face pale as ash, her breath fading like smoke on the wind. His arms reaching for hurt too late, always too late. And behind it all, a voice, not a voice of comfort, a voice of hunger. You cannot save her, unless you choose power. He pressed his forehead to the glass. His breath fogged the pain. He hated these visions, hated the helplessness they carried. But worse than the fear of losing her was the certainty that the Jedi could not help. The Council preached serenity while the galaxy drowned in chaos. They demanded trust, yet offered only doubt. They spoke of the Force as though it were light but every day. Anakin saw the dark corners they ignored. The Jedi were blind, and Mace Windu was the blindest of them all. Anakin's fists tightened every time he stood before that grim-faced master. He felt judged, weighed, and found wanting. Mace's eyes saw too much and not enough. He saw danger in Anakin's passion, but not the purpose behind it. He saw rebellion, but not devotion. All the Council ever saw was a threat, but Palpatine understood. "They don't trust you, Anakin," the Chancellor had said earlier that night, his voice soft, almost paternal. "They never will, but I do. I have always believed in you." That belief burned brighter than any Jedi mantra. It filled the hollow places where the Order's cold words had left scars, and with it came something else, a whisper of hope. There are powers beyond the Jedi's teachings, powers the Sith once used to stop death itself. You could learn them, you could save her. The thought was poison, the thought was salvation, and Anakin drank it deeper every day. The door behind him hissed open. He didn't turn, still awake. Padme's voice was soft, warm as the Tatooine suns he barely remembered. She crossed the room, her gown flowing like spilled moonlight, and laid a hand on his arm. "You've been restless for weeks." "I'm fine," Anakin lied. His reflection in the glass betrayed him, eyes shadowed, jaw clenched tight. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as if to shield her from a future he couldn't change. "I won't let anything happen to you." Her smile faltered. "Arnie, what do you see?" He froze. For a heartbeat, the truth clawed at his throat, that he saw her dying night after night, that he woke with her name torn from his lips. But he couldn't say it, not yet. "Nothing," he said instead. His voice was steel. "Nothing will take you from me." Dawn bled over Coruscant when Anakin strode into the temple. His boots struck the polished floors like war drums. Jedi moved aside, robes whispering, their gazes wary. He ignored them all. The council chamber doors loomed ahead, massive and silent, like the gates of judgment. Inside, 11 masters sat in their circle. The air hummed with tension. Mace Windu's gaze locked on him the moment he entered. That gaze was a blade, and Anakin was tired of bleeding. "Skywalker," Mace said. His voice carried no welcome. "We were not expecting you." "I have news," Anakin said. He stepped into the circle, his presence filling the chamber like a storm front. From the Chancellor, a ripple moved through the council. Yoda's ears twitched. Obi-Wan's brow furrowed. Mace's face did not change. "Speak," Mace said. Anakin drew a breath that tasted of defiance. "Grievous is on Yotapau." Whispers stirred like dry leaves. Ki-Adi-Mundi leaned forward. "Are you certain?" Anakin's jaw tightened. "The Chancellor trusts me. He told me himself." And there it was, the flicker of disapproval in Mace's eyes, quick as lightning, but bright enough to burn. "Strange," the Corran Master said slowly, "that he confides in you, not the Council." The word struck like a slap. Anakin's teeth clenched. Maybe because he knows the Council doesn't trust him, or me. Silence, heavy, accusing. Mace rose, his robes falling around him like shadows. "Your relationship with the Chancellor is unusual." "He's a good man," Anakin snapped. "He's held this republic together while politicians claw at each other for scraps, while we fight and die for a Senate that doesn't care." Obi-Wan spoke softly. "Anakin, no." His voice cracked like a whip. "You sit in this tower and talk about balance while soldiers bleed, while people starve, And when someone tries to do something, anything, you call it dangerous. Mace's eyes bored into him. What you call action, I call control. What you call power, I call corruption. Anakin stepped closer, fire in his veins. You're afraid of me. The words hung like a blade between them. Mace didn't flinch. I'm afraid of what you will choose. For a long moment, neither moved. The Force coiled tight, trembling on the edge of violence. Then Mace spoke, his voice cold as stone. Leave us, Skywalker. Anakin's fists curled. Every instinct screamed to defy him, to ignite his blade and cut down that wall of judgment once and for all. But he turned, his cloak snapping like a storm-torn banner as he strode from the chamber. The doors boomed shut behind him. That night, the dreams returned. Padam on her knees, her hands clutching at him as life drained from her eyes. Flames roared around them, devouring the galaxy, and beyond the fire stood a figure cloaked in shadow, a blade of crimson light humming in his fist. The shadow turned. The mask caught the firelight, and Anakin saw his own face staring back. Chapter 10. The Lord behind the curtain Coruscant gleamed like a jewel under the morning sun. But for Mace Windu, its light had never felt so cold. He stood in the high council chamber, the circle of chairs empty around him. The air was still, but the Force was not. It roiled in unseen currents, dark and heavy, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. There were times when Mace could find the threads of destiny, the hidden fractures in all things. But now, the threads tangled. Every vision ended in the same void. The darkness was no longer approaching, it was here. The doors whispered open. Obi-Wan entered, his face drawn, his beard streaked with fatigue. He bowed slightly. Grievous is dead. The words hung in the air like smoke. A small victory, too small. Kenobi, Mace said, his voice measured. Where is Skywalker? Not with me, Obi-Wan replied. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, Mace felt the weight of something unspoken. He's close to the Chancellor. Closer than ever. Mace's jaw tightened. That bond had been growing like a tumor since the war began. Palpatine had nurtured it, fed it, shaped it. For years, the Council had debated, doubted, whispered among themselves. Was the Chancellor corrupt? Was he merely desperate to hold a dying republic together? Or was he something far worse? Today, Mace no longer doubted. The answer had revealed itself like a blade sliding from its sheath. He had seen it in Skywalker's eyes. The summons came as he knew it would not, through the Council, not through a formal channel, but through Skywalker himself. Anakin entered the chamber without bowing, without even the courtesy of hesitation. His presence was fire barely contained, his voice sharp as shattered glass. He's the Sith Lord. The words fell like a meteor into silence. Mace stared at him. What did you say? Anakin's hands trembled. His breath came fast, as though each word was dragged from the depths of his soul. Palpatine, he's not just manipulating the Senate. He's the one we've been looking for. The Sith Lord, Darth Sidious. For a moment, the chamber seemed to tilt. The fountains, the halls, the centuries of Jedi tradition, they all receded like a dream. Only those words remained, burning into the air. Mace stepped closer. How do you know this? He told me, Anakin said. His voice cracked under the weight of confession. He said he could teach me powers that Jedi don't have. Powers to stop death. The silence that followed was not mere absence of sound. It was a shroud in that silence. Mace felt the shape of the end. The Order had been circling this darkness for years. and now the core lay exposed. The phantom was flesh. The shadow had a face. Palpatine's face. Mace turned toward the great doors. His stride was iron. "Stay here." Anakin seized his arm. "You can't stay here." Mace's voice cracked like thunder, and Anakin recoiled as if struck. "If what you've said is true, Skywalker, you've done your duty. Now let me do mine." He left before Anakin could answer. The doors slammed shut behind him. The turbolift plunged toward the depths of the Senate district, the hum of repulsors thrumming through the silence. Mace stood with 3 Jedi Masters Kit Fisto, again Kolar, CC, Teen, warriors seasoned by war, blades honed by the trials of 1,000 battles, and yet their faces were grim, as if they sensed what awaited them. "This is the moment," Mace said, his voice low, steady. "The core of this war lies in one man. If we fall, the Order falls with us." Kit Fisto inclined his head. "Then we do not fall." Mace looked at them each in turn. "Remember, he has ruled from the shadows for over a decade. Every victory, every defeat was his will. Do not underestimate him." The lift hissed open. The Chancellor's office was a cathedral of glass and durasteel, high above the endless canyon of Coruscant traffic. Sunlight spilled across polished floors. Statues loomed like silent judges. And at the far end, seated in his black chair as if it were a throne, was the man they had come to unmask. Palpatine rose with the unhurried grace of one who feared nothing. "Master Windu," he said warmly, almost amused, "to what do I owe this intrusion?" Mace's boots struck the floor in measured rhythm. Behind him, his Jedi fanned out, cloaks billowing like storm clouds. "In the name of the Galactic Senate," Mace said, his voice cutting the air like a blade, "you are under arrest, Chancellor." For an instant, silence reigned. Then Palpatine smiled. "Are you quite sure about that?" The words were silk draped over steel. And in that moment, the veil tore. The kindly old man vanished, like paint melting from a mask. What remained was something colder than the void between stars. His presence swelled in the Force, fast, coiling, malignant. It pressed against Mace's mind like a tide of knives. The Sith Lord stood before them. Mace's saber ignited with a hiss. Violet light flooding the chamber. His voice rang like judgment. "This ends now." Palpatine's hand moved faster than thought. A crimson blade sprang from his sleeve with a scream of plasma, slashing through the air. Again Kolar fell before his weapon fully left its sheath. CC-Teen staggered, his head struck from his shoulders before his mind could form a warning. Kit Fisto leaped, his green blade a blurbet. Sidious was fury incarnate, his strikes a tempest. A scream tore the air, and Kit crumpled like a broken reed. The duel was no battle. It was a massacre, and then there were 2. Mace met the Sith Lord. Blow for blow, his form 7 surging like a storm against the crimson tide. Each strike cracked the air, shattered the furniture, scarred the walls. Lightning arced from Sidious's free hand, jagged forks of hate that scorched the floor where Mace had stood an instant before. The Force shrieked around them, a maelstrom of will and rage. "You fool," Sidious spat, his voice a serpent's hiss. "The Jedi are traitors to the Republic. You will destroy everything." "I am the Republic," Mace roared, his blade hammering against the Sith's guard, driving him back toward the vast window that framed the endless city beyond. And then the Shatterpoint revealed itself. Sidious faltered. His blade flew wide. In a single, perfect motion, Mace disarmed him, the red saber spinning into the void. Its scream was swallowed by the wind. Mace leveled his blade at the Chancellor's throat. "It's over," he said, but the darkness only smiled. Chapter 11. The Death of Light. The storm had reached its peak. Mace Windu stood at the edge of the Chancellor's shattered office. The city spread beneath him like a sea of molten gold. Wind howled through the jagged hole where Transperistal had burst outward. Rain began to fall in thin, icy needles, stinging his face. His violet blade burned in the gloom, a single beacon in a world sliding into darkness. Sidious knelt before him, his face twisted into something inhuman. The mask of civility was gone. What crouched there was raw malice, given fleshy's molten yellow, teeth bared in a rictus grin. His voice slithered between thunderclaps. "You cannot kill me. Jedi strike me down, and you betray everything you claim to defend." Mace's grip did not waver. His breath came slow, controlled. The wind whipped his cloak like a banner of war. "You've already destroyed everything," he said. Sidious laughter, rasping, broken sound. "The Senate will not see it that way. They love me. They need me. You think you're saving the Republic. No, you're condemning it to chaos." "The Republic is already dead," Mace said. His voice was steel. "All that's left is to end you." Lightning exploded from Sidious's hands. It was a hurricane of white fire, shrieking like 1,000 blades through the air. Mace met it. With his saber, violet light locking against the storm. The energy clawed at him, driving him back a step, then another. Heat scorched his skin. The stink of ozone filled his lungs. His teeth clenched against the pain. But he did not yield. "Weak," Sidious roared, his voice breaking under the strain. His own lightning seared his flesh, warping it into a grotesque mask. The shadow of the man was gone. Only the monster remained. "No," Mace grunted, his arms trembling as he forced the current back inch by inch. "You're finished." The lightning bent, curling against its master, crawling up Sidious's arms in writhing serpents of light. The Sith Lord shrieked, his voice a blade of agony splitting the night. His body convulsed, his robes smoldered. His eyes burned holes in the dark, and then the door hissed open. Anakin, he stood, framed in the archway, rain misting his hair, his face pale and hollow. His eyes darted from Mace to Sidious, from the violet blaze to the writhing lightning. Confusion, twisted into horror. What's happening? His voice cracked like a boy's, but his presence thundered in the Force storm upon the storm. Anakin Mace shouted over the crackle and roar. "He's the traitor, the Sith Lord. We've been searching for..." Sidious's voice cut through the chaos, raw and desperate. "Anakin, help me. He's going to kill me." Anakin froze. His breath came in ragged gasps. "Master Windu don't. He must stand trial. He controls the Senate." Mace bellowed, every muscle straining against the tide of power. "He controls the courts. He's too dangerous to be kept alive." For an instant, time shattered into fragments, rain hissing on scorched durasteel, the taste of copper and ash on the wind. Sidious's voice, a serpent coiling through Anakin's soul. "You need me, boy. Only I can save her. Only I have the power." Anakin's heart hammered like a war drum. Podmeth's face rose in his mind, pale, dying, whispering his name. The Jedi could not save her, but this man, this monster, promised he could. If he lived, don't. Anakin's shout was almost a sob. His boots pounded the floor. His blade snapped to life with a scream of blue fire. Mace saw at the shatterpoint, blazing before him like lightning across midnight sky. One choice, one fracture, and beyond it, the abyss. He swung his saber down. Anakin's blade struck. Pain flared white as a newborn star. Mace staggered, the world tilting beneath him. His hand, his arm gone in a spray of blood and sparks. His saber tumbled into the void, swallowed by the endless city below. No. The cry tore from his throat, raw and primal. The force surged through him, frantic, seeking purchase, but the abyss had already opened. Sidious rose like a shadow unbound. Lightning howled from his fingers. A tidal wave of hate. It struck Mace full in the chest, hurling him backward. Agony seared every nerve, ripping a scream from his lungs. His body arched, convulsed, the light inside him burning away under the onslaught of pure darkness. Power. Sidious roared, his voice the storm's heart. Unlimited power. The blast hurled Mace through the shattered window. For an instant he hung suspended in the rain, Coruscant blazing beneath him like a furnace of stars. The wind tore at his robes, the storm screamed in his ears. Then he fell, down through the endless night, past rivers of traffic and towers of firelit glass. His body spun, a broken comet trailing tatters of smoke and rain. Pain ebbed, sight dimmed. The roar of the city faded to silence. In that silence, the Force whispered not in words, but in visions, the temple burning, younglings crying in the dark, Anakin cloaked in black, his eyes twin suns of fury, and beyond it all, a face he had never seen, carrying a name he did not know, a boy with his father's eyes, standing in the ashes of tomorrow. So this is the end, Mace thought. But deep within, a spark remained, not hope, not victory, but something older than both. Defiance. The darkness closed in. Chapter 12. The fire that took the temple to command came in silence. Not from the Senate floor, not through proclamation. It slipped like a whisper into the circuits of a million helmets, carried on encrypted waves. A single phrase buried in the heart of war. Execute Order 66. Blaster fire shattered the peace of 1,000 worlds. On my Gito, Ki-Adi-Mundi led, his men across a bridge of shattered durasteel, the wind howling through jagged spires. He raised his saber to deflect the fire he thought aimed at droids, till he saw the barrels turn. Red bolts lanced through the smoke. He had time for a single breath, a single flicker of understanding, before the storm tore him apart. On flew Ala Sekera strode through the jungle, sunlight dappling the ferns. She smiled faintly at the clones who had followed her through hell. Then their rifles lifted. She spun, blue blade a blur, but the jungle erupted in fire, and she fell among the flowers. Across the galaxy, Jedi fell. Some fought, most did not have the chance. On Coruscant, the temple still stood serene, its spires cutting the morning sky like lances of stone. The banners of the Order hung motionless in the still air. Within its halls, the fountains whispered, the holocrons hummed their secrets, and younglings laughed as they chased each other through sunlit courtyards. Then the doors opened, and the soldiers came. They marched in silence, their white armor gleaming, rifles cradled like judgment. Behind them walked a figure draped in black, a hood shadowing his face, his boots striking the marble like war drums. The great doors boomed shut, sealing the temple in with its own doom. Anakin Skywalker, what remained of him, stood at the threshold and felt the last chains break. His saber ignited with a snap hiss, blue light spilling across the walls. For a heartbeat, the younglings froze. their faces blooming with relief. "Master Skywalker," one whispered, hope bright in his eyes. "There are too many of them. What do we do?" The blade answered for him. The temple burned. Smoke curled like serpents through the high corridors, coiling round statues that had stood for 1,000 years. Firelight danced across the mosaics of forgotten heroes. Blaster bolts screamed through the air, cutting down robed figures as they sprang from meditation to war. The clash of sabers rang like bells tolling for the dead. Masters fought like gods, carving arcs of light through ranks of soldiers bred for loyalty. For every Jedi that fell, 10 clones died, but there were always more. Their faces were masks of obedience. Their voices were silence. Anakin moved through it all like a blade given flesh. He was death made grace, his saber cleaving bodies, his will and iron tide. The order he had served crumbled around him, but there was no regret. Only fire. Only the promise that drove him deeper into shadow. She will live, whatever it takes. The halls of learning ran red. Holocrons shattered under booted feet, spilling their secrets into flame. Scrolls older than empires curled to ash. The archives screamed without voices as centuries of knowledge died in a single night. In the council chamber, the chairs stood empty, their circle broken. Smoke smeared the windows. Outside, Coruscant glittered indifferent. A city blind to the slaughter in its heart. Inside, a group of Padawans huddled behind toppled chairs, their eyes wide with terror. They had trained for battle, but not this. Never this dot. The doors opened. He filled the frame, his saber humming low, casting his face in blue fire. His hood slipped back, and they saw him soar, the man they had idolized. The hero of the war, the knight who was to bring balance. Master Skywalker, the eldest whispered, voice trembling. "What's happening?" Anakin said nothing. The blade rose. The chamber bloomed with screams. Night fell over Coruscant like a funeral shroud. From the streets below, citizens looked up to see smoke bleeding from the Jedi Temple's spires, fire licking its windows like the tongues of demons. Some wept, some cheered, most turned away. In the Senate, Palpatine's voice thundered like prophecy. "The Jedi have plotted against the Republic. They sought to overthrow democracy itself, but their treachery has been crushed. From this day forth, the galaxy shall have peace." His words washed over the chamber like poison honey, sweet and fatal. Senators cheered, their voices rising like a tide that drowned the last cries of the dying. And in the shadows, the Red Guards stood like statues as the man once called Palpatine cloaked himself in the darkness he had long worn in secret. The Sith had won not with armies, but with a smile. On the temple steps, bodies lay in neat rows, their robes dark with rain and blood. Smoke curled upward, carrying the last prayers of the Jedi into a sky that no longer heard. Clones stood silent amid the ruin, their armor blackened by soot, their visors reflecting fire. Anakin stood at the edge of it all, the city wind tearing at his cloak. His saber hung at his side, dripping rain and blood in equal measure. Behind his eyes, the storm raged. Every breath felt heavier, as if each lungful of air dragged him deeper into a sea with no bottom. But somewhere beneath the weight, the promise still burned. She will live. Whatever it takes. Far above, thunder rolled across the endless towers of Coruscant. In its voice, if one listened closely, there was no triumph, no peace, only the crackle of flames, only the silence of the dead. Chapter 13. The mask that could not breathe fire consumed the sky. Mustafar burned like a wound in the galaxy. Rivers of molten rock flowing beneath a blood-red horizon. The air was thick with smoke, choking, alive with the hiss of volcanic breath. Amid the roar of the planet's fury, two figures moved like shadows across the firelit platforms, two blades clashing, screaming blue against blue. Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, master and apprentice, brother and brother, now enemies. Every strike was a question, every parry an answer neither wanted to speak. You turned her against me. Anakin's voice cracked like the molten rivers below. You have done that yourself. Obi-Wan's reply was iron and anguish. Their blades locked, sparks cascading like dying stars. You were the chosen one. It was said you would destroy the Sith, not join them. I brought peace. Anakin roared, his saber sweeping in an arc of wrath. Freedom, justice. You have brought only darkness, Obi-Wan said, and in his heart something shattered. Beyond repair, they fought through fire and metal, their sabers carving sparks into the storm. Platforms buckled, catwalks fell, and still they battled two forces bound by destiny, tearing themselves apart. The lava roared beneath them, a hymn of apocalypse. Then came the moment, the high ground, the last plea. Don't try it, Obi-Wan said, his blade held steady, his voice breaking under the weight of mercy he could not give. Anakin leaped, and in a heartbeat the galaxy broke. The strike was swift, merciful in its cruelty. Anakin's scream tore the sky as his body spun, his limbs severed, his saber tumbling into fire. He struck the black sand, face twisted in agony, and the heat began to eat him alive. Obi-Wan stood frozen, the saber trembling in his grip. The stench of burning flesh clawed at his throat. He wanted to look away, wanted to end it quickly, to grant the boy one last mercy, but his hands would not move. I loved you, Obi-Wan whispered, tears vanishing in the heat. You were my brother. Anakin's eyes, blazing yellow with fury and despair, locked on his voice. His voice was a ragged snarl. I hate you, Obi-Wan turned. He left the man who was Anakin Skywalker to burn. The fire took him. It licked up his legs, devoured his arms, crawled over his face like a living thing. His screams became raw, wordless sound, torn from a throat blistered by heat. The sky above was a smear of crimson and ash. The ground beneath was hell itself, and yet he clung to life, not out of strength, out of will, out of a promise whispered in the dark. She will live, whatever it takes. He dragged himself forward, nails clawing the black rock, flesh sloughing from bone. The flames clung, feeding on him. His breath came in shallow gasps that tasted of blood and fire. He was dying. Every nerve shrieked with the certainty of it. But then, through the haze of pain, a shadow fell across him. The ship descended like a blade from the heavens, black against the storm. Its ramp hissed open, spilling cold light onto scorched stone. From it came figures, cloaked in crimson, and, at their center, a man draped in darkness. Sidious. He knelt beside the ruin of his chosen one, his smile a wound carved across his face. You still live, the Sith Lord murmured, voice soft as poison. Good, good. Anakin's lips cracked on a whisper. Master Sidious's hands were gentle as he summoned the droids. Take him, prepare the chamber, he will not die. The promise coiled around Anakin like a chain. The last sound he heard before the void took him was the hiss of servos and the laughter of his master, echoing like thunder across the burning sky. He awoke in darkness, Not the darkness of death, something colder, emptier. The air was thick, sterile. The light that pierced the blackness was harsh and white, stabbing his eyes. He tried to move. Pain exploded through what remained of his body. Metal hands were working over him. Machines hummed, sealing flesh. To steel grafting tubes into veins, fusing shattered bone with black iron. He smelled antiseptic, scorched tissue, molten metal. He wanted to scream, but his throat was locked in a collar of durasteel, and then he felt it. The mask, lowering toward his face on silent arms. A thing of black angles and cold inevitability. Its shadow fell across him like the lid of a tomb. He tried to turn his head. He could not. The hiss of hydraulics filled his ears. The mask touched his skin. Darkness sealed. The first breath came with a rasp like a dying star, hollow and endless, echoing inside the prison that was now his world. The sound of chains that would never break. Each breath a verdict. Each exhale a funeral bell. He was gone. Anakin Skywalker was ash on the wind. What rose in his place was something the galaxy had no name for. Sidious stood at the foot of the operating table, his silhouette framed by the cold glow of machines. The figure that loomed above the table taller now, armored in black, cloaked in shadow, turned its masked head toward him. "Lord Vader," Sidious said, savoring the words like wine. "Can you hear me?" The voice that answered was not human. It was a machine speaking through a man who no longer lived. Deep, hollow, heavy as a grave. "Yes, Master." Sidious's smile gleamed like a blade. "Rise." The black figure obeyed, servos whining as it stood. The table trembled under the weight of its steps. Vader turned his gaze to the viewport, where the city lights of Coruscant burned against the eternal night. "Where is Podmem?" The question scraped from the mask like a whisper dragged through iron. Sidious paused her, maestro savoring the final note of a symphony. "It seems, in your anger, you killed her." The sound that tore from Vader's throat was neither word nor cry. It was a wound-given voice, a howl that shook the chamber, raw enough to strip the soul from the air. He smashed the walls with fists of durasteel, the machinery screaming as it crumpled under his wrath. The force convulsed, flinging instruments like leaves in a storm. When the storm broke, there was only the sound of that breath, that endless, hollow breath. The mask could not breathe for him. It could only remind him what he had lost. And so Darth Vader was born not with triumph, but with silence. Not in glory, but in chains. The galaxy had gained a monster, and Anakin Skywalker had gained a prison, one he would wear until the stars. Forgot his name, Chapter 14. Echoes in the crystal, the galaxy bled into silence. The screams had faded. The fires had burned low. The Jedi Temple stood as a blackened monument, its proud spires now jagged teeth against a polluted sky. Smoke coiled upward like dying prayers, carrying with it the ashes of an order that had stood for 1,000 generations. The halls that once sang with the hum of sabers and the laughter of children now lay in ruin, echoing with ghosts, and among those ghosts, something lingered. Beneath the temple's shattered heart lay the vault of holocrons, untouched by fire but desecrated by silence. Thousands of crystals lined its walls, each one a prism of memory, a voice frozen in light. The archives that had guided centuries of Jedi wisdom now glimmered faintly in the dark, their hums low and mournful, like monks chanting for the dead. Then one flickered, its surface fractured with a pulse of purple light, weak but insistent like a heartbeat refusing to fade. Dust stirred in the still air, drawn to the glow as if by gravity. The holocron trembled on its pedestal, shards of memory straining against the crystal walls. A voice seeped from it, not whole, not clear, a fragment, a shadow, the shatterpoint. The sound was low, broken, like wind across a tomb. It dragged, syllables like chains, fractured by static, yet unmistakable. The tone was iron, the cadence sharp as a blade. Mace Windu, he had fallen. The galaxy believed him dead, consumed by lightning and gravity, body broken against the abyss. But the force was not a river that carried all to the same ocean. For some, the river shattered into streams, scattering shards across eternity. And, so a piece of him thought, while defiance clung to the currents of the living force, anchoring itself where only whispers could reach. Inside the holocron, it had not been meant for this. It was a vessel of knowledge, not a soul. But desperation does not ask permission. At the edge of death, as his body fell through fire and storm, Mace had reached, not for life, but for meaning, not for breath, but for warning. The shatterpoint had not ended with him. The fracture was still widening. Someone had to see, someone had to know. Years bled into decades. The Empire rose. The galaxy knelt. The temple became a fortress of silence, its libraries gutted, its fountains dry. Stormtroopers haunted its halls, boots striking like hammers on the bones of history. The holocrons that once glowed like stars were locked in vaults or shattered. For sport, the survivors of the Jedi scattered like leaves in a storm, hunted to the edge of oblivion, and still the shard of Windu waited, not whole, not sane. Its thoughts were echoes spiraling in darkness, looping fragments of what had been and what might yet come. The boy, the storm, Skywalker. Sometimes it was a whisper, sometimes a scream, sometimes nothing at all, but always it remembered the fracture. Always it sought an ear to hear. For years none came, until the day the vault stirred with footsteps. A figure cloaked in black descended the spiral steps, boots ringing hollow on ancient stone. The glow of the crystals painted his armor in shards of blood and fire. His breath filled the chamber, mechanical rasp, endless and inescapable. Darth Vader walked among the dead. He moved without hurry, his cape dragging like a shadow torn from night. His gloved hand brushed a row of holocrons, their light dimming under his touch. He paused before the pedestal where the purple shard flickered faintly, its glow guttering like a candle in a storm. The sound came again, broken. Skywalker. Vader froze. The name was a knife twisting in a wound that had never healed. His breath quickened slightly, imperceptibly, but the mask carried the tremor like a confession. His hand hovered above the crystal. The voice rose, warped by static, yet carrying a weight no machine could erase. Did you choose, or fall? The words clawed through the silence like iron on glass. For an instant, the darkness trembled not in the galaxy, but in the man who wore the mask. Memories surged. A chamber of shattered glass, a blade falling, a scream torn from his own throat as lightning devoured the sky. Vader crushed the holocron. The sound it made was not a crack, but a sigh as if something long imprisoned had finally let go. Purple shards scattered like tears across the floor. Their light dying in an instant, silence returned. But in the deep currents of the Force, the echo did not fade. It slipped away, thin as smoke, seeking another vessel, another voice. The warning would not die, and far from Coruscant, Beyond the rim of Empire's reach, a boy stirred in his sleep. He dreamed of a purple glow. He dreamed of a voice like thunder, rolling across broken skies, whispering words he did not understand. Balance is not peace. It is fracture. It is fire. Luke Skywalker woke with a start, breath ragged, heart pounding. The twin suns of Tatooine had not yet risen, but the horizon burned red as though the world itself bled into dawn. The Force remembers. It carries every scream, every vow, every failure like scars across its infinite skin. And sometimes when the wound is deep enough, speaks through dreams, through visions, through the shards of those who refused to die, and in those whispers, something waited, not for vengeance, for reckoning. Chapter 15. The ghost beneath the Ashtha Jedi Temple was silent, not the silence of peace. The silence of a graveyard. Years had passed since the night it burned, but the scars had never healed. Its spires once white as bone were now blackened, jagged against the bruised sky of Coruscant. Rain streaked down their flanks like tears. Etched in stone, the banners that once bore the sigil of the Order had rotted away, their threads clinging like ghosts to shattered walls. The Republic was gone. The Empire had risen and fallen. And yet the temple remained abandoned even by scavengers, for there are places the living do not linger. Not because of traps or guards, but because the stones remember, and the stones whisper. Deep beneath the ruins, where light had not touched in decades, lay the catacombs. Vaults carved into black rock, lined with murals of heroes whose names were now dust. The air here was heavy with the scent of rust and old incense, the floor carpeted in ash that never blew away. No matter how the wind howled through broken halls, in the heart of that darkness lay a chamber. Its walls were cracked, scorched by fire that had burned hotter than flamed the fire of betrayal. The ceiling had collapsed long ago, leaving ribs of broken durasteel clawing toward the void above. Rain pooled on the floor, black and still as oil, and etched into the stone by blade, by will, by the last breath of a dying man, were words no scavenger could read. Balance is fracture. Fracture is the path. The shatterpoint remains. The letters glowed faintly in the dark, not with light, but with something deeper, the residue of the Force itself, burned into the marrow of the world. For this was the place where he fell, Mace Windu, or what was left of him. They said he died on Coruscant, cast down by lightning and gravity, body broken against the city's endless sprawl. They said the wind scattered his bones into nothing. They said his name only in whispers if, at all for to speak, it was to remember what the Jedi had lost. But the Force does not forget. When his body shattered, something else endured. Not a ghost knot in the way Jedi return, serene and luminous in death. This was no gentle light. This was the echo of a storm too violent to fade, a scar carved into the fabric of reality. It did not think, it did not dream, it waited, and sometimes, when the galaxy slept, it spoke. The first to hear it were scavengers. They came for kyber shards, for relics, for bones they could sell to cults that worshipped the old ways. They laughed as they pried open vaults, spat on the sigils of the Order, stuffed their packs with trinkets that once hummed with the Force. Then the whispers came at first. They thought it was the wind low and guttural crawling along the stone. Then it grew clearer, a voice like iron grinding against iron. Do you see it? The bravest laughed, fired blasters into the dark. None of them left the temple. The Empire sealed the ruins after that, though no record of why survives. Some say Vader himself descended into the catacombs once, his black shadow stretching across the vaults. Others claim the Inquisitors came, drawn by something they could not name. They too vanished. Centuries passed. The temple sank deeper into myth, its ruins swallowed by the ever-rising towers of Coruscant. Few remembered its name. Fewer dared to seek it. But the whisper did not die, because the Shatterpoint had not healed then. One day the stones stirred, not with footsteps, with a presence. Light flared in the darkness, a blade of green, humming softly, casting fractured reflections across the black water. A figure stepped into the chamber, hooded, his face carved by years, but his eyes bright as twin stars. Luke Skywalker, the son of the man who ended the Order, the son of the man who wore the mask. His boots splashed through the stagnant pool as he approached. The words burned into stone. His fingers traced the grooves, feeling the heat that still lingered after decades. He knelt, the green glow painting his scarred hands, and the whisper came not to his ears, but to his bones. Skywalker. His breath caught. The voice was a storm trapped in a jar-ragged, broken but vast as the void. "Who are you?" Luke asked, though some part of him already knew. The silence stretched, heavy as a tombstone. Then the point of fracture still bleeds. Luke's hand tightened on his saber. He had heard whispers before Ben, Yoda, even his father, their voices woven with warmth and sorrow. This was different. This was not a presence that sought peace. It was a wound that refused to close. "What do you want?" he asked. The water rippled, the air thickened, pressing against his skin like a storm surge. And the voice came again, jagged as shattered glass, to warn, to break, to bind. Images slammed into his mind fire, consuming the temple. A man with eyes like molten gold, a blade of violet vanishing into the abyss. And beyond that, something else, a shape in the dark, formless yet immense, watching from the edge of time. Luke staggered back, breath ragged. His saber hissed louder, as if sensing the weight of the unseen. "Balance," the voice rasped. "Crawling into his marrow is not peace. It is fracture. It is sacrifice." And then it was gone. The chamber was silent once more. The rain dripped. The letters on the stone flickered and died. Luke stood alone, his pulse thundering in his ears, but the whisper remained in his bones, in his blood, in the thread of destiny winding ever tighter around his throat. The Force had spoken, and it had spoken with the voice of a dead man. Far above, Coruscant slept beneath its eternal night. But deep in its bones, something stirred, a storm long past, and yet not ended. For the galaxy had not healed, it had only begun to break. Chapter 16. The Sun and the Firewalkers. Stars stretched like cold fire across the void, as Luke's X-Wing knifed through darkness. Ahead, a world loomed, a scarred sphere, circling a dying sun. Its surface was cracked like shattered bone, rivers of magma glowing faintly through wounds that never healed. Mustafa. The name tasted like ash. Luke had heard. Whispers for months, visions in meditation, fragments in dreams. A voice like iron, grinding through stone, warning, beckoning. He followed because he could not turn away, because something in that whisper sounded less like threat and more like plea. The fracture bleeds still. The Shatterpoint waits. Now he descended into fire. The planet roared beneath his ship, a world that had never known peace. Lightning forked across black skies. Wind howled like a beast, carrying the stench of sulfur and smoke. Luke's hands gripped the controls tighter as the ship rattled through turbulence. His heart pounded not with fear, but with a weight older than himself. He landed on a scorched plateau, jagged with basalt teeth. The air shimmered with heat, pressing against his skin like molten glass. He stepped out, boots sinking into ash, cloak snapping in the furnace wind. His saber hung heavy at his side, its green glow silent for now. Ahead, the ruins roast-twisted metal ribs, black towers half swallowed by lava flows. Time had eaten much, but Luke knew this place. Not from maps, not from archives, from visions. From nightmares. Here, the Skywalker line had burned. The fortress was hollow now, its halls gutted, its walls pocked with scars of war. Luke walked through corridors that groaned with the memory of screams. His boots stirred dust older than the Empire, dust that smelled faintly of scorched flesh. Shadows stretched like claws across the floor, flickering with the red pulse of rivers below. And then he saw it, the chamber. Its ceiling gaped to a sky choked with smoke. The floor was a cracked mosaic of obsidian and bloodstone, marred by burns too deep for time to heal. At its heart lay a blackened platform, warped and broken, a surgical slab fused to iron restraints. Rust streaked its edges like old tears. Luke's breath caught. This was the place where Anakin died, where Vader was born. He stepped closer, the Force pressing against his skin like storm winds. Heat shimmered before his eyes, blurring the edges of reality. He smelled fire, blood, ozone. His hand tightened on his saber hilt. The whisper came again. Skywalker. Luke froze. The voice was low, jagged, rising from the stones themselves. You walk. The fire his feet knew. The air thickened, humming with power. Shadows writhed on the walls, shapes half-formed, flickering in the glow of unseen flames. Luke swallowed hard. Who are you? His voice barely carried above the roar of distant lava. The wound, the will, the fracture that did not die. The whisper crawled into his bones. You feel it, don't you? The choice burning in your blood. Luke's jaw clenched. I'm not my father. The darkness stirred slow, deliberate. He said that too. Heat swelled. For an instant, the chamber was gone, replaced by merciless. Luke staggered, clutching his head as images tore through him like blades. Coruscant burning, the temple in flames, younglings screaming as blue fire cut them down, a hooded figure kneeling before a shadow crowned in lightning, and through it all the masks, descending like a tomb lid, sealing away a name. Luke gasped, stumbling to his knees. The floor beneath him shimmered with heat, his reflection fractured in black glass. The whisper crawled closer, curling around. His thoughts like smoke. Do you think balance is peace, boy? It is fracture, it is fire. To heal, you must break. No. Luke's breath rasped, his fingers digging into the ash. That's not true, is it? The voice was a storm now, surging through the chamber. Your father broke, and through him the galaxy turned. You will break too, or everything you love will burn. The shadows twisted, and from them stepped a figure tall, cloaked, a saber burning violet in his hand. Luke's heart stuttered. Mace Windu. The apparition's face was a ruin-scarred, hollow-eyed lips, carved into something between rage and grief. His voice was thunder ground down to gravel. You think this ends with you? The shade growled. The Shatterpoint bleeds across generations. Your father shattered the order. You will decide if the wound closes or festers forever. Luke rose slowly, his saber igniting with a hiss. green fire cutting through the gloom. If this is some Sith trick, the violet blade met his with a crack that shook the hall. Sparks rained like dying stars. The figure pressed forward, strength surging through shadow. Do you feel it? The voice roared, their blades screaming as they locked. The fracture in the Force. Will you seal it or widen it? Will you break the galaxy or yourself? Luke gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes. The vision burned around him, fire, ruin, the taste of ash in his throat. I won't fall, he snarled, forcing the blade aside. Not like him. The shadow smiled, a terrible, broken thing. We all fall. Question is, which way? The chamber exploded in light. Luke was alone. The shadows were gone. The whisper was silent. His saber hummed softly in the dark, its glow painting the walls with trembling green. His chest heaved, his heart hammering like a war drum. Slowly, he lowered the blade. The silence pressed close, thick as stone. But deep inside, the echo remained. Balance is not peace. It is fracture. It is fire. Luke turned toward the jagged doorway, his silhouette framed by rivers of molten light. The path ahead burned, but he would walk it, because he understood now what the whisper truly was. Not a command, not a curse, a warning. And warnings are not given to those who will fail. Far above, the storm raged on, scouring the black sky. And beneath it, the son of Skywalker walked alone, across the bones of his father's sins, carrying a question no prophecy could answer. When the Shatterpoint comes, will I break the galaxy or myself? Chapter 17. The Shatterpoint fulfilled. The throne room was silent, except for the hum of power. Lightning crawled across the durasteel walls, crawling from the fingertips of a shadow enthroned. The Emperor's laughter coiled through the air, like smoke, thin and sharp as a blade drawn slow. Luke Skywalker knelt, his body racked with agony. Lightning danced across his frame, every nerve screaming as fire tore through flesh and bone. His saber lay far beyond reach, clattering into shadow when the storm began. He could taste blood. He could taste failure. Above him, Sidious smiled. Strike me down. The Sith hissed, voice slick with venom. You could not even strike a choice. His laughter cracked like glass. Vader stood at the edge of it, all black, towering, silent. The mask stared unblinking, its polished lenses reflecting Luke's. Agony, Palpatine's glee, the storm of energy that devoured hope. Luke's voice broke through the thunder. Father, please, one word. A whisper, torn from a throat scorched by pain. Yet it cut through the years like a blade, through layers of armor and silence. Through the iron weight of the mask. Father, the word he had not heard in decades. The word he thought he had killed. Something shifted. Not in the throne room, in the man inside the machine. He remembered the fire, the screaming rivers of Mustafar, the hiss of the mask sealing over his face like a tomb. He remembered her, Padme eyes wide with terror as he reached for her throat. He remembered a child's laughter, long gone. He remembered a promise whispered in the dark. She will live, whatever it takes. But she had not lived, and everything he had taken, everything he had killed for that dream had rotted to ash. He had broken the galaxy. He had broken himself. And now, before him, the same choice bled into the air like smoke. Luke's screams tore at him like claws. The fracture still bleeds. A voice whispered not from Sidious, not from Luke, but from the marrow of the Force. An echo buried deep, harsh, unyielding. Mace Windu, Balance is not peace, it is fracture, it is fire. To heal, you must break. He had spent a lifetime breaking others. Now, for the first time, he understood. Sidious's laughter swelled, the lightning pouring from his fingers like a river of knives. Luke arched, his cry ripping the silence in two. The Emperor leaned forward, lips peeling back in ecstasy. Yes, yes, die, Jedi, die, as your order died. And that was when Vader moved. Slowly, at first like an avalanche breaking loose after centuries of stillness. His black boots struck the floor with a sound that cracked the silence. Sidious turned, lightning still writhing in his claws, the sneer curdling into something colder. "What are you doing?" The Emperor hissed. Vader said nothing. He only stepped forward, the weight of his shadow drowning the light. His breath came in deep, mechanical gasps, the same breath that had haunted the galaxy for decades. And yet, for the first time, it sounded like something more than survival. It sounded like choice. The Emperor's smile flickered, the lightning wavered. "No, no. You will not." Vader's hands closed around him like a vice. The lightning turned inward, screaming arcs clawing across black armor, searing flesh fused long ago to steel. Power howled through Vader's frame, setting fire to circuits, ripping open scars that had never healed. His body convulsed, systems failing one by one, alarms shrieking in his ears. But he did not let go. "Not this time," Sidious shrieked, a sound older than words, as Vader lifted him from the throne and hurled him into the abyss. Lightning tore through the room in one final scream and then silence crashed. Down like a stone, the Emperor was gone, and so was Anakin Skywalker. Luke crawled to his father, hands trembling as they grasped scorched black armor. Smoke curled from shattered circuits. The mask was cracked, lenses fractured like broken glass. Beneath the metal, something stirred a breath, raw and shallow, more human than machine. "Father," Luke whispered, tears carving rivers through soot, "I've got to save you." A rasp of laughter dry as wind through bones slipped from the shattered vocoder. "You already have," the voice whispered. Not the voice of Vader, not the voice of the mask. A voice hoarse, frail but his dot. Anakin Luke froze as gloved hands, scarred and trembling, reached for the mask. "Help me, take this off." "But you'll die," Luke said, throat breaking. "Nothing can stop that now." The locks hissed. The mask came free with a groan of metal. And there beneath the ruin was a face Luke had never seen, yet had always known. Scarred, burned, hollowed by years of shadow but human. Eyes pale as dying stars looked into his, and for a moment they were not Sith or Jedi. They were only father and son. "Tell your sister," Anakin breathed, the words crumbling like ash. "You were right about me." And then silence. The rasping breath ceased. The shatterpoint closed. Luke bowed his head, tears falling onto the scorched floor. The throne room stank of ozone and death. The galaxy outside roared with war. But here in this hollow of ruins something broke, and something healed. The prophecy had not been fulfilled by strength, not by victory, not by survival. It was fulfilled by surrender, by love, by fracture, far beyond Ender. In the currents of the Force, a storm stilled. A scar that had bled for decades began to close. And in that silence, deep, endless silence, a voice whispered like distant thunder. "Mace Windu, balance always comes at the edge of a blade, and the hand that holds, it must break." The echo faded, carried into the infinite. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Force breathed. Chapter 18. The Temple of the Forgotten Name. The galaxy slept. War had burned itself out like a dying star. The Empire was ash scattered across the void, its banners rotting on dead worlds, its fleets reduced to drifting skeletons. The Rebel Alliance had no name, now only hope, stretched thin across the stars. The Sith were gone. The Jedi were gone. And yet, the Force whispered on, as it always had. On Coruscant night lay heavy over a city that had forgotten the sky. Towers climbed like black knives into the clouds. Airspeeders screamed along arteries of light, blind to the bones beneath. Their path, for buried deep under centuries of steel and stone, under rivers of forgotten blood, lay a ruin no one spoke of anymore. The Jedi Temple, its spires were gone. Its halls collapsed, its sanctuaries swallowed by darkness. Storms had scoured its marble, scavengers had stripped its bones, but still it stood, not whole, not broken, just waiting. A scar that would not fade, and in that scar something stirred. The wind howled through the hollow corridors, carrying ash like the ghosts of old fires. Rain fell through cracks in the shattered roof, pattering against black stone etched with words long worn smooth. Pools formed in the hollows of the floor, mirroring broken statues whose faces time had erased. There were no footsteps here, no voices, no life, but there were whispers, low at first, thin as breath drawn through teeth, then louder, curling along the walls like smoke. They rose from the stones, from the dust, from the marrow of the place. Skywalker, Firewalker, balance. Through fracture, voices layered on voices, tones stripped of flesh, woven from memory and echo. Jedi, Sith, shadows of those who had touched the Shatterpoint and bled their will into the Force. Among them, one rose sharp and hard as iron mace. Windu, did I fall, or did I ascend? The question rippled through the ruin like a stone cast into black water, unanswered, unanswerable. For the truth was not in words. It was in the silence that followed. A silence deep enough to swallow names, to swallow centuries, to swallow all that had burned before. Above, the city roared with life. Billions moved across gleaming bridges, blind to the bones beneath their feet. To them, the temple was myth, a story whispered by archivists and zealots, a ruin sealed beneath the arteries of the modern world, a grave too deep to trouble the living. But the Force is not stone. It does not sleep. It coils. It breathes. It remembers. And in the deepest vault, beneath collapsed floors, beneath the ossified dust of 1,000 years, a flicker of purple light trembled in the dark. Not a flame, not a crystal, a memory. Of a man who had stood at the heart of fracture, who had seen too much, who had fallen not from weakness, but from the weight of truth. It pulsed once, twice, then stilled, far away, on a nameless world bathed in starlight. A boy dreamed. He walked through a hall of broken statues, their faces lost to time. He heard voices calling, not with malice, not with mercy, just with need. He saw a blade of violet vanish into the abyss. He saw a mask that could not breathe. He saw fire consuming towers, and in that fire, something waiting. When he awoke, he could not remember the dream, but the feeling remained, as if the galaxy itself had whispered, balance is not peace, it is fracture, and fracture always returns. The temple stood silent. The wind carried Ashdot and the Force endless. Patient, merciless, waited, because nothing is ever truly forgotten. Not names, not promises, not ghosts,